you'll know what I'm talking about. So, now I do quickly want to give you a little bit of my bona fides as a Democrat. I grew up in Michigan in a fairly non-political family. Although my parents were farmers, and to make ends meet, they both worked part-time or seasonally in really good union jobs. But we definitely lived in a very conservative area. How conservative? Well, when I was 2 years old, President Nixon came to visit our county. Our county in Michigan had about 25,000 people total, and 15,000 of them turned out in 1974 to see his motorcade. Now, my dad loved to shoot 8mm home videos. It was a longtime hobby of his when we were kids. And while I can't find the footage anymore, for years after this, he would pull out his projector and he would show the clip that he shot that day. Me as a 2-year-old bouncing up and down on my mother's shoulders, trying to get a view of the president's motorcade, and then throwing up on her hat just as Nixon rounded the corner. That was April 1974, and I might have been onto something because he wasn't president for a whole lot longer than that, right? Now, when I was in 3rd grade, I remember participating in the Weekly Reader mock presidential election. Weekly Reader has been gone now for, something like 40 years, I think. But back in 1980, they would have a mock election. There were 47 3rd graders in my class that voted that day. You want to guess who I voted for? Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter, yeah. I was the only 3rd grader who did, out of 47 of us, and that did put a brief damper on my political interest there for a while. Now, things did pick up in the 90s. I got to college, and in college I was the chapter president of the University Democrats for 2.5 years at Central Michigan University. If Orgy were here right now, I would be celebrating the number of times that we beat Michigan State in football games, even though they were a much bigger school. And it does lead to 2 stories that I'll share in a moment from my college days. Now, during college, I ran for the County Board of Supervisors in 1992, election loss number 1. And again 2 years later, for the board, but in a different district. Maybe I thought I had a better shot, I don't know. And again, that was election loss number 2. Now, as a seasoned candidate with name recognition, including all of those headlines, Peterson loses again, in 1996, I moved up to run for the State House of Representatives. Election loss number 3, all before the age of 30. And probably the first clues that maybe I thought it was a better time to find a better way to create a better world than me trying to get elected to office. So I will say, as a 3-time losing candidate, I do celebrate the fact that the 3 incumbent Republicans I faced had to raise more money and spend more time than they had ever had to do in a campaign before. And none of the 3 Republicans who beat me ever won elected office again after they tangled with me. Now, 2 quick stories about my life in politics that I promise do segue into my time at Imago Dei. As chapter president of the University Democrats, I got to attend the State Democratic Convention in Detroit, where I chaired the caucus for Young Democrats. Now, let me preface this by saying I was still young and brash and stupid. On the conference floor that morning, it was loud, lots of things going on. If anybody's ever been to a state political convention, they are raucous affairs. And I'm trying to bring other college kids to order. So I'm standing in just on the convention floor in front of 30 or 40 people, about maybe the same number that are here right now, and just trying to get their attention, get things moving. And I'm standing up front, and someone comes and taps me on the shoulder, and I look over, and it's an older black woman. She says very nicely, "It's so great to see young people involved in the Democratic Party." I'm like, yeah, that's important, and yes, you're right, and thank you very much, and I'm trying to get the meeting going, so, you have a good day. And I start again to get the meeting going, and get a little tap on the shoulder. It's still her. She says, well, I just really think it's really, really important that people know that the kids are the future. I'm like, yeah, that is very true, very true. Thank you very much. I hope you can find your seat. I got to do what I got to do right here. The mayor's getting up. He's going to gavel us to order anytime now. Could turn around, go back, try to start the meeting again, get one more tap on the shoulder. And I turned and she said, I just really, 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 want to say how great it is to see all of you kids. And I'm like, yes, I need to do this right now. You need to go where you need to go, and that is it. And I think I even held my hand out, kind of turn around and try to get her to move on. Just about that time, the mayor of Detroit gets up on stage, starts to gavel the convention to order, and says, before I start, before I bring this to official business, I know the spotlight operator has been following her around, and I just want to turn the spotlight on and highlight Rosa Parks. And as soon as he said Rosa Parks, I tried to hide and crawl away as much as possible. And in an instant, immediately went through my mind and said, please tell me I did not tell her to go sit in the back. I don't think I did, but I learned a couple of important lessons that day, right? Including a key one about being much more respectful of your elders. Okay? I also learned another important lesson at that convention that night. Back at the convention hotel, messages came out about 9 o'clock asking each of the University Democrats college chapters what graduation rate average for kids, rich or poor, black, brown, white, privileged or under-resourced, the average of everybody. 71% of kids graduate high school in 4 years. That is one of the lowest rates for any county in Arizona. I think we're next to last. And for large counties based on population size, it is one of the lowest rates anywhere in America. Again, let me say that. Only 7 out of 10 Pima County kids are graduating high school on time. Now, what percentage of Imago Dei kids? Impoverished, under-resourced, and almost always black, Hispanic, or Native. What would you think would make a great on-time high school graduation rate for those kids? 75%? 80%? Okay. What if I told you it was 90%? Would that be impressive? Yeah. Well, it's not 90%. In fact, in our 18-year history, our on-time graduation rate, working with these middle school kids and then continuing to work with them at their choice of high school, our on-time graduation rate is 98%. There are literally 3 kids that didn't graduate on time in our history, and one of them was killed in a car accident. So, let me keep clicking here. I think that was the end of the video. So, how do we do it? All right, how do we break the cycles of poverty through education at Imago Dei? First off, let me give you the brief history of the organization. We were founded in 2006 by 2 Episcopalian ministers, Reverend Ann and Reverend Susan. And in addition to being fantastic human beings and Episcopal ministers, they were also a married couple. Okay, so we were founded by 2 lesbian ministers. Okay, so that's already a little bit different than most private schools, right? And they wanted to model the success that they were familiar with from their own backgrounds and their own lived experiences of high-end schools in the Boston suburbs and in New York City and places like that. But they wanted to do it in Pima County. They wanted to do it here in Tucson because they wanted to serve the kids who weren't otherwise going to have that sort of lifetime opportunity, okay? So when you think about private schools, if you think television and movies and things like that, you probably see a lot of cute little kids in matching blazers and ties, and they're getting dropped off by their nanny in the family's 4th or 5th SUV or whatever she's allowed to bring them in and stuff like that. We ain't that kind of private school, okay? We do have a tradition of excellence, right? And we work really hard, and we have amazing dedicated teachers, but nobody is writing a check to make sure that, there's an endowment for our school, or that the kids are all going to get, new matching blazers to wear on our field trip to New York or anything like that. It just doesn't work that way. But we've been doing it. We started with 5 kids in the parish hall of St. Andrew's Episcopal, which is just a little bit south of downtown Tucson. We're there for a couple of years, grew that to the first couple of classes, or grade levels, I should say, and then eventually settled into our downtown site where we are now, and currently are enrolling 87 kids in grades 4 through 8. That is the largest enrollment we've ever had in our history. COVID almost killed us in the metaphorical sense, like it very much in the literal sense did. Every single one of our kids lost an immediate family member to COVID, whether that was grandparent, aunt, uncle, cousin, sibling, whatever the case might be, and the school was forced to shut down. We were remote for a year. If anything good could be said to have come out of COVID, it's that our teaching staff had to learn how to use technology a lot better. And that has carried forward for us. Just in case you're wondering, the estimates are now that the effects of COVID on the educational system will be felt for at least another 5 to 10 years. I can tell you that my 4th graders missed preschool and didn't learn things like how to line up and like how to tie their shoes, right? So we're still working within those sorts of things. But again, we are having fantastic outcomes here as a school. And one of the ways we do it, there's a lot of different ways, long days. We have the kids most days from 7:30 to 5 o'clock, okay? And it's always fun for me to join in on the enrollment tours when we start to take in the families and the kids that might want to join us for next year, because the kids almost always want to pass out when they hear how long the school day is. But I can tell you, once they get used to it, they love it. And a long school day is the best thing for working parents, because the most dangerous time in America for a teenager, or a tween, I guess we call them now the younger ones, is from 3 to 5 o'clock in the afternoon. When no one's home watching them, and maybe they're not home either. They're off somewhere getting in trouble. So my kids are with us till 5 o'clock most days. We also go 11 months out of the year. July is the only month that we don't have school. We go through our regular 4 quarters, 2 semesters, just like every other school. We also have mandatory summer school for 3 weeks. That's an attempt to shorten the gap between re-enrolling for fall. Summer learning loss is a very real thing. The education system will tell you that a kid will lose about 30% of what they've just learned over the course of a typical summer. Worse for low income, worse for minority students, okay? Because they're not going to camp, right? They don't have a tutor, they don't have, a working parent and one at home to make sure that they're doing things like that, right? So we, at summer school, it's mandatory for all of our returning students. We make the day a little bit shorter. It's 9 to 2. We have a little bit more fun. We go bowling. We teach them how to swim. We go cycling, but we still have those core classes: math, language arts, history, science. And just that extra 3 weeks, they still get, about 5 weeks off for the summer, makes a big difference in their summer learning loss. They don't come back at the beginning of August having forgotten a third of what we just tried to tell them. So we rely heavily on tutors at the school. Want to volunteer? That's again how I got started. In 2012, I was a Rotarian, and I attended a meeting that Reverend Ann spoke at, and she talked about the school for 10 or 12 minutes over lunch. And one of the questions was, what can we as Rotarians do for you? And she said, more than anything, I need people who can come in and read or do math with a kid for 1 hour once a week. And at the time I was living what I called, 2012 was what I called my year of yes, where without telling people ahead of time, I would say yes to anything I was asked for a whole year. There were some stories from that I can't share, but that was a good yes, right? I said, I can do that. I can be at that school from 4 to 5 o'clock on Wednesdays and get matched with a kid and help him get his math homework. First of all, I didn't know that they keep changing the way you teach math, so that was fun. But I got matched with a kid, a 5th grader named Miguel. And what I didn't know was the impact that I would be able to have on his life and he would be able to have on my life over that course of that school year. I also didn't know, because I'm pretty sure Ann didn't mention this, that she wasn't looking for a tutor for this kid for 5th grade. She was looking for 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. So almost every Wednesday afternoon for 4 years, I worked one-on-one with that kid. And it was a lot of math. Sometimes it was a little bit of history. Sometimes it was a little bit of language arts. And sometimes it was just a little bit of listening to what was going on in his life. Okay? And we're still in touch today. He's 22. He's going part-time now to Pima Community College. He works at one of the In-N-Out Burgers up in Tucson. And he and his wife just had their first child So tutoring is one of the ways we get that done. And then final for this slide, we do have Saturday school. Once a month for most of the school year, we also have the kids in on Saturday, again from 9 to 2, provide that free breakfast, provide that free lunch, and it's not a typical school day then. We do things that are informed by our learning and informed by things like science and technology and engineering and math, but we have a lot of fun with them. A lot of these kids are migrants and refugees and children of migrants and refugees, so we do things like have the Halloween party on a Saturday afternoon, because most of the kids have never carved a pumpkin in their life, or don't understand the sort of cultural things that are happening. We also use that as an excuse for our science fair. I don't know if Sandy, did you make the science fair this year? Yeah. Wonderful time. When I was a kid, we did, baking soda volcanoes, and that was it. You made a mess. That was the science fair. These kids are out doing things like trying to understand the quantity of microplastics in our shampoos, right? Trying to understand how to get better cell phone reception if the electrical grid goes down during a natural disaster. Okay? They have, for 9 to 14-year-olds, real life problems that they're looking for real life solutions to. And that's kind of where Saturday school fits in. This Saturday for March, I'm bringing a bunch of the kids down to the Episcopal Church here in Green Valley, and we're going to be planting trees. As part of their Shade Equity program, the kids grow trees and learn about why some neighborhoods had more and some neighborhoods had less. And they learn how to become public speakers by going to those neighborhood associations and asking for permission to plant more trees at things like bus stops and in the city parks. Okay? So again, more ways that we get this going and get this done. Small class sizes. So right now in Tucson, and I think it's generally pretty true across the country as well, a public school teacher is expected to have about 32 to 35 kids in their classroom. Okay. We were set up in 2006 to grow, but to grow with the expectation that we would always have two things: no more than 20 kids in the grade, and no less than 2 teachers in that classroom. So we are set up for a 10-to-1 student-teacher ratio. Every one of our classes has a lead teacher and a supporting teacher, and they're done departmentally. So for example, in science, we have a lead teacher for the 7th and 8th graders, and the lead teacher for 4th, 5th, and 6th. The 4th, 5th, and 6th is the backup teacher. I hate the word backup, but that's a good way to think of it. Is the secondary teacher in those 7th and 8th grade classrooms, and vice versa. So all of the teachers get to know all of the kids that way. There's always 2 teachers. If there's a kid or 2 or 3 kids struggling with a concept, we can pull them out of the classroom, and we have breakout rooms throughout the building where they can sit down and really hash out that and make sure that that level of understanding is where we need it to be. Okay? That also allows us to supervise the tutors and things like that. Now 10-to-1 is pretty impressive for student-to-teacher ratio, but I did the math. We have 87 kids. I looked at everybody that would be considered a teacher, because we also have music, right? And we have technology, and we have teachers for other things like that. So in fact, for our 87 kids, we have a 6-to-1 student-teacher ratio in our building, okay? Which is always on display when we have our fire drills once a month, and you see everybody pouring out of the building and walking down the sidewalk through Tucson, and you got a big adult for about every 6 kids or so. We're also a very small school. So again, Imago Dei, 5 grades, 4 through 8. Just added 4th about 2 years ago for the first time. We only have 87 kids, and that's quite deliberate as well. Okay? We could physically probably grow to be about 100 kids, and I think if we financially could support that, we would. There's always a lot more kids that we could serve, and that families are interested in having them at our school, but we're never going to be very big. We don't want to be. We want all of our teachers to know all of those kids' names, right? And we want all of our teachers to value those kids as individuals and be able to meet them as individuals, where they are in their learning and where they are in their social emotional development and where they are just in their life. Because of the nature of the kids that we enroll, we also tend to have lots of siblings and cousins and folks that go to their all the same church and everything like that. So it's very much like a family at the school. So I don't think that's going to change. We get tours from like the National Association of Independent Schools. We'll send people to try to see what we're doing, and they ask how they can replicate that model and how we can grow. You know, how could we serve 200 kids? And the answer of how we could serve 200 kids is for those people to go back to their town and start serving the next 100. Because we don't want to be too much bigger. That said, we would like to eventually be a K-8 school, because the longer we can have the kids, the more years we can have the kids, the more difference we can make in their lives. But financially, it's just not yet on the plate. Okay? We do focus on core academics: math, science, technology, language arts, history. And history for us is current affairs, with that history woven into it, right? Walked into a classroom the other day with a tour and asked one of the kids what they were studying, and he said, "We're studying the history of terrorism in the US." I said, "Great, history. What are you guys talking about?" He said, "Oh, this thing that happened a long time ago called 9/11. I'm like, first of all, bravo that we're teaching that, because I think most history classes run out of time about the time you get to Eisenhower or so. Not our teachers. But more importantly, did I feel old when the kid was telling me that something that happened a long time ago, and it was called 9/11, okay? But we don't just do core academics. So what you can see in the photos, a little bit here, I unfortunately didn't have time to put a lot of photos into this. That first one is Jesus at our summer camp, or not our summer camp, our fall camp in Prescott, where again we take the entire school up to a campground in Prescott for an entire week. And the older kids get to do the ropes course, where he is about to rappel down that zip line after having climbed to it in a harness. It was safe, but having to have that personal self-confidence to shimmy up a utility pole, essentially to get to the top. That photo was taken by another teacher who I led to the school camera to, because I wasn't getting up there to take that photo. And he's a great kid. Further down below, you can see some of this year's 6th graders. For the first time in several years, we were able to get back to going to the Southern Arizona Construction Trades event, taking the kids out for a couple of hours to, show them what it's like to be, in the skilled trades: plumbing, electrical, construction, things like that. So these are some of the kids photographed at a front loader, but they got to be very hands-on, operate nail guns, which wouldn't have been the first thing I would have signed the 6th grades up for, but man, they were enthusiastic. And we had a lot of fun. We take advantage of our downtown urban location to do things like this with the kids. Just last night, if I look or sound a little bit tired, just last night, Miss Whitfield, our upper school history teacher, and I took a few of our 7th graders to the Fox for their first concert. And we saw something called Drumline Live, which is representatives of all the historic black colleges and universities have the very large drumming and marching bands. And they took some of the top ones of those from all of those different schools and did a stage show where they did everything from Cab Calloway through Motown up to Beyonce, but with that big band sound. The kids had a fantastic time. And we kept having people come up to us all night long saying, "What are you doing here with those little kids?" I'm like, we're changing the world. We're a social justice movement, Masters of Middle School, ma'am, here's my business card. You don't always have time to tell them everything you want to tell them. So we do focus on the core, but because we have them again from that 7:30 to 5 o'clock time period, we build in the extracurriculars. So the kids get music class, they learn how to make tile, they go to Tucson Museum of Art for their art classes. They get access to the permanent collection that none of us will ever probably get to see. Right? We have all these special arrangements. We go to the Fox, we go to the Arizona Theater Company. We get to take them over to the university. We're a block off the streetcar, which is free. I can load the kids up and shoot over to the university for Flandreau, or in this case, this photo was our 5th graders on Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day. In November, we took all of our 5th graders to the African American Museum at the University of Arizona. where the tour guide was shocked when she said things like, who knows, so-and-so, who knows why the Tucson Park is now named after Donna Thompson, and all of our kids could raise their hands, right, because they know that history. There was this teacher. I put those words there specifically. I just heard this story the other day, saw it in an education trade journal. A graduate student back east, I want to say Harvard, was writing their paper. They reviewed over 2,000 biographies of successful people, business people, inventors, educators, political leaders, sports figures. Anybody that had been successful wrote a biography. They reviewed more than 2,000 of them. And they synthesized that there was one recurring theme in every successful person's story. And that could be basically boiled down to starting a story with, there was this teacher. There was this teacher, right? This teacher who did this thing, or who made this difference, or who made the effort, right? And so our 87 kids, hopefully, have that advantage of having that teacher. Just yesterday, I actually whipped this slide up just this morning, actually. These are some of our fantastic 6th graders, and this is Nair, one of our 8th graders at the science fair. He's going to be going on to Sal Point Catholic High School. He earned a full-ride scholarship. His family would never be able to afford something like that. And we're going to continue to support him through our graduate support program. One of the things that we've learned over the years is that we can help a kid like him earn a scholarship and get accepted to one of the top schools, high schools in Tucson, and not have to pay for it. But scholarships at South Point cover tuition and books. They don't cover things like him wanting to be on the lacrosse team. That takes a $400 payment. We're going to cover that for him. Because he may not become a lacrosse star, but he's going to spend an awful lot of time hanging out with the kind of kids that you don't get to hang out with when you look like him. Okay? But just yesterday, I made this slide for a reason. We had a guest in from the Episcopal Church of Arizona, the diocese, and he said something that really resonated with all the teachers that were there. We are called to serve the underserved, and it's a privilege we earn. Okay? These kids, it's a great honor for me. I'm not a teacher. Again, thank God for that. But I get to be part of their lives, right? I get to make a difference in their lives. I get to see them grow up and get to see them succeed, get to see them graduate high school. Okay? That is the end of the official presentation. I thank you for your time. We do have handouts. We're going to start to pass those out. There's a couple of one-sheet flyers which talk about the school a little bit and tell you about our history. I just remembered there is another slide, by the way. How do we pay for it? I knew there was another slide in there. All right. We're also going to be passing out a brochure that tells you about the Arizona Private School Tuition Tax Credit. Okay? So how do we pay for this? Okay? Unlike most private schools, we've already learned we don't charge tuition. We have been around for 18 years. We started with 5 fifth graders. My oldest graduate ever is 29 years old. She was born in a refugee camp in Rwanda and emigrated to America when she was 7 years old. We got her as a 5th grader, and she has continued on her education. She is actually finishing her PhD at Vanderbilt University, where she is studying infectious diseases. And her hope is to go back with Doctors Without Borders and fight infectious diseases. If, as we mentioned earlier, Robert K. Jr., will let people do that. She's 29 years old. She's getting that PhD. We've helped her every step of the way. We continue to. But she also still has mounting college debts. And she's not going to be someone that I can ask for a big check for a long time, if ever. Okay, so we don't charge tuition. We don't have an endowment. We don't have a pool of successful graduates going back 100 years like our colleagues do on the East Coast. Okay? So we have to rely on other things. You're getting that brochure for the Arizona Private School Tuition Tax Credit, and this is where I'll start to be able to take some questions as well. We exist in a system that we did not create, nor did we necessarily advocate for. Okay? But it is nevertheless the system that Arizona has put in place that gives you as a taxpayer the opportunity to put your tax liability toward tax credits. And there are several different kinds of tax credits. Before I started working for the school, I was most familiar with the qualified charitable contribution, which is about $400 for single people, $800 something now, I think, for married. And you give that to organizations like the food banks and Literacy Connects and certain programs of the United Way, things like that. Then there's also the foster care credit for organizations that help place children through foster care. There's also a public school tax credit that you can do. And then there's the private school, which for some reason in the state of Arizona is by far the largest of the tax credits. Married, filing jointly people, if that's any of you in this room, can move almost $3,000 off your tax bill and give it to a school like Imago Dei to serve our kids. Okay? You do it through a student tuition organization. The brochure you're seeing is from what we call the Arizona Episcopal Schools Foundation. It's a coalition of 5 member schools, including Imago Dei and including St. Michael's in Tucson. I'm on the board of directors, as is my boss, Cameron. He's actually the chair of the board. We usually recommend that because we know exactly how it operates. We know that there's very little overhead, and you can make those gifts to the organization, and that money comes right to Imago Dei to support our kids. Every private school has some scholarship students. That number will range from anywhere between 5 to maybe as much as 65 or 70% of the kids at a school. At Imago Dei, it is 100%. You cannot be a student at our school unless you're eligible to receive this kind of scholarship. Okay? This is not a voucher. Okay? You're going to hear from a speaker in a couple of weeks, I think, from Save Our Schools. Listen to what she says, because there is a very intentional plan to destroy public schools in the state. And the vouchers are one of the ways that they're getting it done. We do not accept them, and we could not afford to accept them. They cover about $9,000 worth of cost to a school like us. The $3 million question, we are $3 million budget each year. I have 87 students. That's $35,000 a kid. I couldn't possibly switch to a voucher system. We wouldn't want to anyway, but it wouldn't begin to pay. I would have to enroll 4 times as many kids to cover that. Okay? So we don't do vouchers, and we're not a big fan of that system. But the private school tuition tax credit was set up. It makes a school like us possible, and so we're going to continue to push for it. It's about 70% of our operating income. So if you haven't filed those taxes yet, I would ask that you learn more about how to do the tax credit. Contact me if you have any questions. I have a stack of business cards up here as well. And just take a chance with us. I would also stress that this is your tax liability. I get the questions this time of year every day from people who say, well, I just sketched out my paperwork and it says I owe $300, so I guess I'll send that to you. I'm like, you owe $300 more. Your tax liability was actually based on your income, and you've paid most of that already in payroll taxes throughout the year. We can get that money back. So it's the limit of your tax liability under state law, $2,910 for married filing jointly, and up to 1,459 people for $459 for happy single people like me. All agree in this room that there's legislators in the majority up there who aren't putting that money there to begin with. Right? So the private school tuition tax credit still gives us an opportunity to take some of our liability and do something amazing with it in Tucson. I think we're coming up to the top of the hour roughly, so I want to be sure that this was another reason why I'd be a bad teacher. I would just keep talking, and we don't have bells, so nobody ever knows when to stop. That's a great question. That's one of the photos I probably should have included. As of middle school, first of all, let me answer that for schools in general. Most schools stop having PE after 5th grade because the older kids are expected to spend that time learning, and by learning it often means getting ready for the test in the school standardized testing. We know that it's best, particularly for a long day, 9.5 hours with these kids, that both the teachers and the kids themselves need to go to recess. We are in an urban setting, so our kids every day get to go to the Plaza Park near the library downtown on Stone. They get a half hour either before their lunch or a half hour after their lunch, depending on which grades they're in. If that's being used for a special activity, we go to the grassy area that's next to the Children's Museum, which is just about a block and a half south of the school as well. But in addition to that, we do have an agreement with a parkour gym that's about a block away from the school. Does anybody know what parkour? Yeah. I've tried to get photographs. The kids are just bouncing around a mile a minute. They're jumping off of things and landing and rolling on tarps and cushions and all these things. And it's a structured setting where they learn actually leadership and teamwork and things like that. So the kids get to go to the parkour gym. The younger kids go several times a week. The older kids get to go at least once. We have a cycling program. So we teach urban cycling, how to ride safely, how to maintain your bicycle. We help the kids. They ride on our bicycles, but we also help them get bicycles through partnerships that we have. And the kids learn how to navigate traffic safely and how to, get off curbs and go down steps and things like that on their bicycles. It's far more than I would ever want to do with them. Yes, and they love that class. And the kids that can't ride at all when we start get a partner and a buddy, and they learn how to ride. So we try to keep them very active and keep them doing those sorts of things. Absolutely.
Question.
Yes.
I think you said 70% of your money comes from the tuition fund, and then are you tied into, besides maybe private donors and like the United Way or something like that? That's my first question. My second question, what do you do when you've got more than one sibling who wants to go to your school? How do you select?
Okay. Okay. Let me answer the money question first to that. Other 30% or so of the funding equation is private donors. Anywhere from folks doing $5 a month on their MasterCard and Visa, that I can run every month, up to individuals making significantly larger gifts. A lot of grant writing. I do that for the school as well. A lot of foundation support. What we don't get is any directed tax dollars back from the state or the federal government. We don't even participate in the school lunch program because you could take their money and pretend that ketchup's a vegetable. And we choose not to do that. We actually have catered lunches from Johnny Gibson's Market just down the street. Fresh fruit, fresh salad, and an entree every day for the kids. And they love it. So yeah, the 30% is from a lot of other different sources kind of all cobbled together. Now your question about siblings, we can enroll a certain number of new kids each year. So next year for my 8th grade, for example, I have 19 returning 7th graders. So I'm only looking for one more, right? And that kind of ripples through. We only have 12 4th graders on purpose, and that grows to 16 for 5th grade. So with the expectation that I'm going to keep all 12 of those 4th graders, I'll be looking for 4 new 5th graders. We give preference to siblings within a family, and so I already know that next year's 4th grade includes 5 brothers and sisters of kids that I already have who have dibs on 5 of those 12 spots. So I'm only looking for about 7 more, and cousins and neighbors and friends. Our marketing budget for enrollment is about $300 for the year. We run one ad on a kiosk at a bus stop. In part because we have the mom network. Yeah. They see what we're doing and they tell each other, right? So, Allison, who's got 2 kids enrolled in our school, came in the other day and she's like, I just got a new neighbor across the street and she's got a 7-year-old. So it's going to be 2 years or whatever, but I told her, she's got to, get on your list. It's amazing. Does that answer how we, okay.
Actually, my question was about food, which you answered.
Okay.
Actually. And then I wondered, do you teach them any healthy eating?
Yes, yes. Again, photos I should have probably included in this presentation. We have a farm-to-table program. Our kids tend to plots at Los Milpitas Community Farm on the shores of the Santa Cruz, up there at the base of A Mountain. They do different grade-appropriate things. So the older kids are doing the shade equity. They're raising the trees. But the 6th and 7th graders go over and work those plots. All of our families also have required volunteer hours for the school. So a lot of parents like to come and do the farming as well. And we raise them through that. They also are learning entrepreneurial skills. So our 7th graders take a class taught by volunteer instructors from Intuit, one of our great corporate partners. And they learn entrepreneurial skills so that as 8th graders, they develop products that they've made from the farm and sell them at farmers markets in Tucson. That's how they raise money for their 8th grade class trip.
One more question.
Sorry.
Just another question about funding, because do you get Title I funds?
We do not. We would be eligible for Title I.
For those, correct?
Yes.
And why not?
Because of the loopholes that you have to go through and the governance that applies. We prefer to be a very independent school. We teach to Arizona state standards, but we do it differently than what most schools do.
Well, and I can understand that. I just think that would be another, because when you're funding breakfast and lunch, I mean, that definitely would be a Title I budget item, as speaking of someone from my, anyway, it just seems like another option. Should money become tighter for you to look at?
Yes, yes. Although that would also presume that Title I money doesn't get tighter itself. Yes.
You're right about that too.
So, one more note, and I'm happy to stay as long as you want. The Ecksteins are having me over for dinner. I think the joke in Green Valley would be that dinner's at 4:30, but I don't think it actually is. So.
And I'm going to do a list. If you'd like to take a tour, that's where it speaks to you. It's going up, and we'll do one in May. I don't know what the exact date is, but if you sign up and sign up on email, we'll get together and we can carpool with them to get there to do that. That really speaks for itself to see the school.
Judy, okay, one quick question, hopefully quick. Have any of your students or all of your students been affected by all these threats of mass deportations, either actually losing family members or just being scared and the psychological impact?
So I brought my orange safety cones for exactly that question. Is the recording still on?